Hi, for this project, I'm going to discuss the physics of dancing. And I actually was a dancer for 15 years and I danced competitively. So I have used some of my own experiences and pictures throughout this presentation. So, what is dancing? The definition of dance is to move one's body rhythmically, usually to music. But to someone else, dance may be purely art. It may be without music. Now looking at it from a physics perspective, dance is so much more than I ever thought. Dance, it includes math, it includes science. So dance is not only a sport, but it is also one of the most difficult, disciplined, and beautiful art forms as well. I've been a dancer my entire life. I've always thought the dance was beautiful, but looking at it from this perspective has really been an eye-opener. Ballet is the foundation of all dance. Every dancer starts out in ballet, and ballet teaches self-discipline, correct body placement, strength, and gracefulness. When you think about these things, you think that ballet is just needed because, oh, you need to learn to point your toes, or, oh, maintain a pose for a little while. But looking at it now, ballet teaches the foundations of the physics. And as you go on in dance, it's the more complex parts of the physics that take place. So physics is involved in all dance movements. As the dancers run, they leap, and they turn across the floor. Dance involves complex movements as the acceleration of angular velocity of the dancer performing a pirouette or an apparent horizontal trajectory of the complex models. The dancer is not the only force that is involved in the creation of the dance movements. We like to look at a dancer and be like, oh, she is great because she practices, or, I'm a great dancer. I am in control of all my movements, and to some extent that is true, but I am not the only force that acts upon my movements at all times, not just on dancers, but on everyone else as well. Gravity, support from the floor, and friction from the floor act upon a person. So gravity acts in a downward force always. Support from the floor acts in an upwards force always, and friction from the floor acts in a sideways force, which until kind of researching this, I never had any clue about. So I'm going to take a minute and talk about the center of gravity and balance. So dance requires a great amount of grace and balance, and so this is a very important part of physics in dance. Many dance moves consist of motionless poses interspaced with movements of the body. Often these motionless poses demonstrate balance of the body over a small area of support on the floor. So if you can look to, it's like the left picture, with my leg up in the air, I am able to hold that position because I am reaching that center of gravity and balance within my body and the floor. So, as I discussed in my paper, many dancers pretend as if their body is being pulled straight up towards the ceiling by a tiny little string, and imagining that helps us pull our body straight up in hopes of maintaining that center of gravity, and so we're able, in return, to hold our pose. So the balance condition is achieved if and only if the center of gravity lies on a vertical line passing through the area of support at the floor, hence the reason many dancers imagine a string running through their body. In the case of ballet, the first position occurs when the heels are touched together and the toes are turned out in an ideal 180 degree, resulting in the ballerina reaching a state of relative equilibrium with relative respect to lateral movements. If the dancer is motionless, the sum of all the forces and torques acting upon the body must be zero, and therefore the force of gravity vertically downward will be balanced by the force upward from the floor to the foot, acting on the same vertical line. So this entire concept is taken from Newton's third law of motion, which discusses Whenever one body exerts a force on a second body, the second body exerts an oppositely directed force of equal magnitude on the first body. If the center of gravity is not in line with other equilibrium state forces, the dancer will fall to one side because she will be unbalanced and experience an angular acceleration towards the ground. So if you look at the other picture with the three dancers in it, I'm in the purple. I thought this was an interesting photo to use because it looks as if, oh no, we don't have our center of gravity reached, we're falling to the ground, although that was supposed to happen in that case. I thought this was a good example. So in most cases, what truly happens is the center of gravity is not 100% reached. The dancer might come close to that balanced area, so that would result in forces that are not perfectly vertical, but they are closely enough vertical that it results in the dancer appearing to be balanced. So next I would like to talk about rotational mechanics in the pirouette. The most common move in all types of dance is the turning movement, or the turn, and the most common type of turn is the pirouette. To perform a pirouette, the dancer must support herself on one leg while the other leg is in the retire position. All pirouettes must start with some form of preparation position, followed by a torque exerted against the floor. So if you look at this picture here, this is me. I am prepping myself for a pirouette. It is in second position. Your arms go out and your legs go out. Your knees are also bent. This bent position of your knees allows your body to push off and sail yourself into a pirouette. This torque on the floor against the dancer causes the angular acceleration that produces the turning motion. So, like I said, to initiate the turn, the torque can be exerted against the floor by 2 feet with some distance. In ballet, that is where the pirouette is most commonly performed. That is where many dancers learn the pirouette. Pirouettes are done from either the 4th position or the 5th position. The 4th position, your feet start more widely apart. The 5th position, your feet are more closely together. So starting the turn from the 5th position, which, like I said, has the smaller distance, will require more force to produce the same torque than starting the turn from the 4th position, which has the larger distance. This occurs because of physics. So this occurs because torque, uppercase T, is equal to force, uppercase F, multiplied by the distance of the lever arm, I. Another way to look at the torque used in a pirouette is to take into account the dancer's moment of inertia. The moment of inertia depends on the mass of the body and its distribution relative to the axis of rotation, so therefore a body of given mass will have a larger moment of inertia if the mass is far from the axis of rotation than if it is close. So like I previously said, the moment of inertia depends on the mass of a body and its distribution relative to the axis of rotation, so therefore a body of a given mass will have a larger moment of inertia if the mass is far from the axis of rotation than if it is close. An example of a dance movement with a large moment of inertia would be the arabesque. An arabesque has a larger moment of inertia than a retire position, which you get with the pirouette, and this type of turn is different than the pirouette because the leg is stretched out behind the dancer rather than close to the dancer at the knee. If a person is able to determine the angular acceleration of the arabesque turn or pirouette, then the person is able to determine the torque used to produce it. If the angular velocity is known, then the change in angular velocity divided by the time it takes to do the pirouette would result in the angular acceleration. So the next topic I would like to talk about would be conservation of angular momentum. This is a major concept for dance analysis because this includes angular momentum. Angular momentum is the same as linear momentum, but angular momentum is given by L equals IW. Angular momentum is a conserved quantity and is a constant as long as there are no torques acting on the body. Therefore, the total angular momentum L of a body can change only if there is an external torque acting on it. So if you look, I use the same picture as I used for the previous topic. And this is because not only is your starting position of a turn very important, but if you notice, although my arms may be not, my knees are facing forward, I have my arms to the side because I whip my arms around to help myself turn, but my head is facing forward because I spot. So spotting is our next topic. It is very, very important to turning. Spotting is a term used in dance where the dancer fixates her eyes on a single object as she turns to prevent herself from becoming dizzy and to also help her to maintain balance through her turns. Sometimes spotting is believed to help the dancer squeeze an extra turn out of multiple pirouettes, but actually rotating the head relative to the rest of the body does not change the total angular momentum of the body as a whole. I found this very interesting because as a competitive dancer, I knew that spotting was important to make sure that I was not, getting dizzy after my turns, but I truly did think that by spotting, I was squeezing in that extra turn. So going back to, spotting and how it's believed to help the dancer squeeze in an extra turn, and that's actually not true. So I found out that the body may descend from turning position before completion of the turn, but the additional rotation of the head gives the appearance of a full additional turn. So, the dancer may not be actually making another turn, but to the viewer, it does look like the dancer is squeezing in that extra turn. So the next topic I would like to talk about is friction and the glissade. Friction involves both chemical and mechanical properties of surfaces. Each type of surface has its own coefficient of friction, and the coefficient of friction multiplied by the vertical force perpendicular to the floor will give the force of friction which acts against the motion of the dancer. Friction is a very important part of dancing, and to increase friction, many ballet dancers use a substance called rosin. Rosin has a significantly smaller dynamic coefficient, but it has a high coefficient of kinetic friction. When the dancer uses rosin, this results in a large horizontal frictional force if the foot is stationary on the floor and a much smaller force if the foot is moving. This difference is very useful and important and just huge for dancers performing glissades, which is a step that needs this horizontal force only when one foot is not moving against the floor. A glissade is a gliding motion from the fifth position to an open stretch position, and many dance movements involve sliding on the floor or rotating against it. So in order to perform this movement, the dancer uses a rosin because without it, the friction on the floor would be too great. So whether a dancer needs a change in linear or horizontal motion as in the glissade or an angular acceleration as in the pirouette, the floor must be able to supply the horizontal forces that provide for such accelerations. So in any case, too much friction would prevent these movements from occurring at all. So the next topic I would like to discuss is motion in a curved path. And as you can see, I don't really have a great example for a picture for this one, but mainly what I want to focus on is acceleration. So the term acceleration not only refers to a change in speed, but also to a change in direction of motion. When the dancer moves around the stage in a circular path, there is a force on the body as the dancer pushes off the floor, which is directed toward the center of the circle. This force causes a constant change in motion which allows the dancer to travel on the curved path. As the dancer moves around the circle, he or she can lean towards the center of the circle, and this lean prevents the dancer from leaving the circular path. I thought this was really awesome. I have kind of went back and looked at some of my old dance videos, and as I'm dancing with my groups and as we're performing, I'm noticing us traveling in circles, and I didn't really realize we were traveling in circles, and you can see it on the screen that we are leaning in towards the circle, and that's keeping us in our circular path. And so I just think this is really exciting that dance has been something that I'm so passionate about, and physics is something that I truly enjoy and that truly comes easy to me as a topic. And they're intertwining, and one makes the other occur, and it's just been a phenomenal experience to research. The last topic that I would like to discuss is the projectile motion and the grand jeté. So all jumps involve vertical accelerations and forces. Since gravity acts vertically downward on the body, a person is only able to remain motionless if there is a vertical supporting force equal to his or her weight. Graceful, elegant jumps are accomplished by overcoming gravitational pull and creating the illusion of a raised center of gravity. So in order to jump off the ground, the dancer must exert a force downward against the floor greater than his or her weight for long enough to achieve the vertical upward velocity desired. So as you've seen in a picture a few slides ago, my knees were bent. This can also be called a plie. Plie is when you bend the knees. You plie before a turn, you plie before a jump, you plie before really anything. Plie is very important, and it's one of the first things you learn as like a 3-year-old dancer. So your knees are bent. So not only does this downward force that you are exerting, equal out the gravitational force, but it allows you to be able to exert enough force to jump off the ground and gain that power that you need to sail into the air. So the more strength or mass the dancer has in his or her legs, the more power the dancer is able to apply to the jump. This, coupled with timing, creates a jump that appears to send the dancer floating effortlessly through the air. I can tell you firsthand, it is one thing to watch a dancer jump through the air, and it is another thing to be the dancer jumping through the air. You can watch a dancer on TV, you can watch me dancing in my room. When I do a jump, it looks as though it is effortless, but actually it is not at all. It is, the physics playing into this. It is the plie, it is the, the bending the knees, the putting that force from your body into the ground, sending yourself up into the air, that just creates this magical effect. So jumps combined with horizontal motions such as the grand jeté, a leap in which the weight of the body is thrown from one foot to another, produce trajectories or have projectile motions. Once the body is off of the floor, the center of gravity follows a parabolic, can't say that word, sorry, trajectory that is completely determined by the initial conditions starting on the ground. The trajectory follows the path of a normal projectile, which it is that it begins with the initial velocity, which decreases as the dancer rises into the air until it reaches zero. The dancer reaches zero, just like, throwing a ball up into the air. So like that ball, when it reaches that maximum height, the dancer, when she reaches her maximum height during her leap, that is whenever she is at zero. So following this maximum is the descent to the floor, which is an accelerating downward motion until the dancer reaches the ground again. In order to calculate the different parameters of this parabolic trajectory, one can employ two-dimensional kinematics. So both the x and the y component must be considered in this case. Also, as in all projectile motions, the initial velocity in the x direction is equal to the final velocity in the x direction. This means there is no horizontal acceleration. And finally, the acceleration in the y or vertical direction is always due to gravity. So for the conclusion, I would like to just go back and discuss some of the main points that I talked about earlier. Physics is a huge role in dance. So every single dance movement that there is, physics plays a role in the movement, physics plays a role in the dancer. Balance. Balance is so important, and balance is the condition achieved if and only if the center of gravity lies on a vertical line passing through the area of support at the floor. And so, like we discussed, this is the reason that dancers imagine that string pulling their body all the way up to help them reach that center of gravity. It is important to remember all pirouettes must begin with a preparation position. So this preparation position is always followed by a torque exerted against the floor. This torque on the floor against the dancer causes the angular acceleration that produces the turning motion. So without the preparation position, the dancer would not be ready to turn. Without the torque, there would be no angular acceleration, and in turn, there would be no turning motion. Friction is a very important part of dancing, and to increase friction, many ballet dancers use a substance called rosin. So when the dancer uses rosin, this results in a large horizontal frictional force if the foot is stationary on the floor and a much smaller force if the foot is moving.